What's up, everybody? I'm back with another full game review, and today I'm going to be talking about Doom: The Dark Ages. Now, Doom is a series that played a huge role in the rise of first-person shooters in the 1990s, and over the past decade, it's gotten a second chance at life, thanks to the 2016 reboot and its absolutely stellar sequel, Doom Eternal. Same as those two games, this brand new entry is developed by id Software. However, this game is substantially different for a lot of reasons, but thankfully, this is still the Doom we all know and love. It feels like Doom, it plays like Doom, and it definitely looks like Doom, so they did a fine job with giving this game its own identity without going through an identity crisis. Here's the thing that I picked up from this game: everything about it is good, just not as good as its two predecessors. But don't get it twisted, Doom: The Dark Ages is great. If you're someone who really enjoyed Doom 2016 and Eternal like I did, you're going to want to prepare yourself for a lot of new additions, as well as a couple of things that made those games great being taken from us. So check your comparisons at the door, and let's talk about something that feels like the elephant in the room: Mick Gordon. So Mick Gordon made a bigger name for himself than any video game soundtrack composer for his original music in the modern Doom games. His unique and incredible score, which blended groovy, face-punching metal riffs with tons of other elements, played a big part in what gave Doom its reputation. But long story short, there was a bitter scandal involving him and Bethesda, which led to Mick Gordon being dropped from this game's soundtrack. And while the music here is still definitely good, Mick Gordon's absence is felt. It doesn't quite have the same memorability or catchiness. Though it did grow on me as I got further in and heard more of the tracks, I did find myself putting on a stank face and bopping my head a few times. But this is a video game, so how good is this video game to play? I personally had a lot of fun with it. I acknowledge that they went pretty much in the opposite direction from Doom Eternal's verticality and ultra-fast frenetic combat combined with platforming. This time around, the main combat loop is strictly boots on the ground. They traded hopping and swinging around for more ways to directly face your demonic foes. Cause now you're not just shooting demons, there's also more depth to melee combat. There's a few different types of melee weapons that you pick up as you progress, with my personal favorite being the big giant mace you get towards the end. I just found it really satisfying to bash a demon with a melee attack and watch it explode into ammo and health pickups. However, they didn't really need to take away the glory kills. Those finishing moves from the previous games made the gore really impactful, and it was super gross and just cool to look at. I never got that feeling in this game because the glory kills aren't here anymore. And then there's the most unique addition to the combat, the shield, which was absolutely awesome to use and very versatile. Now obviously you use it to block and sometimes parry attacks, but you can also throw it at fodder demons to instant kill them without consuming ammo. And it also has spinning saw blades, and you can throw the shield saw at bigger demons to stun them and give you a longer window to shoot at them. Now the runes in this game also work a lot differently, because instead of being upgrades to already existing abilities, these are new abilities that activate whenever you successfully parry a projectile. You can upgrade your runes, melee attacks, and weapons using gold that you find scattered across most of the levels. It's worth noting that being able to shield yourself against most attacks definitely makes combat easier, and all around I found this game to be significantly easier in general. The timing window for parrying an attack is by far the most generous in any game I've played. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing, not every game needs to be super challenging, but it's just something I picked up on. I started on Hurt Me Plenty, and eventually raised the difficulty to Ultra Violence, so I personally recommend going one difficulty above what you would normally choose for these games. What I really liked though is that the game does have a level of difficulty customization I was really impressed with. There was a bunch of sliders that you can mess with to tailor the game how you wanted it in terms of difficulty, and I think that's great. Doom Eternal had pretty challenging combat, but the thing that made it rather easy to get through was all the extra lives you could pick up all over the place. And extra lives are back here, but I think the game would have been just fine without them. I barely died during my whole run, so I ended up not even picking up most of them. The demons here were kind of pushovers. But back to the weapons. There are some familiar weapons, such as the Super Shotgun and Plasma Rifle, which has a different name, but it's still the same thing. As well as some new weapons, like the Pulverizer for instance, which uses crushed up skulls as projectiles, which is heavy metal as shit. Overall, the shooting itself feels just as great as all the other games. You can really feel the power behind your shots as you blow the limbs off all your foes. The enemy types have a lot of variety here as well. There are plenty of familiar enemies as well as a few new ones, and the designs of some of these newer enemy types were really freaking cool. Although some of the familiar enemy types like the Hell Knights weren't really as intimidating because, again, the game makes it pretty easy to defend yourself. And there's a few sections of the game that serve as deviations from the main combat loop, where you can hop into a giant mech or on the back of a dragon. Which on paper sounds like it would have made for some standout set pieces, but I just didn't care for them. They didn't feel good to play. I didn't mind the mech gameplay per se, but the dragon riding was rough. It was not good. And that's a damn shame. So the campaign takes place across 22 different chapters, which is significantly more than either one of the previous two Dooms. But some of them move along pretty quickly, so there's still roughly the same amount of game here. I finished the campaign in a little bit under 20 hours, and that was with trying to get most of the side content during my first playthrough. If you're just starting through all the main objectives, then it might take you a little more than 10 hours. I wanted to talk about the level design a little bit, because there's a lot of really cool looking locations that are both familiar and new. To fit the game's medieval theme, the combat arenas take place mostly in outside areas with dense forests, swamps, and areas full of old ruined structures, as opposed to all the corridors that the previous games had. And you get treated to vistas of massive, intricate, old-timey structures like castles and fortresses in the background. It all feels a bit bigger and more open and ranged. Even the combat shotgun that you start with has a lot of range to it. You can hit demons with that thing from pretty far away. But you can also use a shield bash to close the gap between you and your enemies so you don't have to run around so much while you're shooting. And as usual, the map is full of question marks for secrets to find off the beaten path, with some environmental puzzles that are pretty straightforward. So while almost everything about the gameplay turned out pretty good, I need to get into my biggest complaint with the whole game, and that is the story. I mentioned in a different video that I was hoping the story would pick up more after the first few chapters. It did not. Now I totally get that these games are known for having really simple storylines, with more lore being relegated to collectible pages, which is something I loved about Doom 2016 in particular. But they set up a bigger scale story here with more named characters and fully dialogue driven cutscenes, then proceeded to go absolutely nowhere with it until the very end. As a matter of fact, by the game's midpoint I started forgetting there even was a story. The characters they introduced ended up being super one-dimensional, cause there was just nothing for them to do except order Doomguy around. Once it did reach the last couple of chapters though, we got a couple legit boss fights, and the bosses I thought were really well done, and a lot of fun. So, what's my overall consensus? Doom the Dark Ages feels bigger, wackier, and more heavy metal, at the expense of some of the finer elements that made Doom 2016 and Eternal really special. I think if this was the game we got before we ever got those other two, it'd be an absolute grand slam. So yeah, this game, for all of its flaws, should still satisfy your bloodthirst if you're someone who's into the approach that this game takes, with the slightly slower and more melee-focused combat. I'm giving Doom: The Dark Ages a 7.5. If you made it to the end of this video, thanks a bunch. It means the world to me. So hit the like button if you enjoyed what you saw, and hit subscribe if you haven't already. Peace out, everybody.